All right, today we're going to talk about the first people to arrive in North America, the American Indians. I'm going to use the term American Indians because it's generally what people in academia use. It's, in scholarly works, use the term American Indian. There's a couple of reasons for that. It's what we've used for the past 500 years. And it's also, there's not really consensus about what these first people should be called. In Canada, they're called First People. United States, the term Native American was popular in the 80s, 90s, and the aughts. It's sort of pushing away for American Indian these days. Mexico, you still have the term Indios and a variety of different terms in other areas of Latin America. So because there's not this consensus for these first people, I'm just going to go ahead and use Indian. Obviously, you're going to call people what they want to be called, but in this learning environment, let's use the term Indian. So we're going to be talking about American Indians pretty extensively, although probably not as extensively as it should seem. You had people living here from 20,000 years ago to 1492. If you're talking about the history of North America, particularly the United States, it seems like that should be what 95% of what you're talking about. Well, for reasons we'll discuss later, there's a lot of reasons we can't talk about history before 1492. In particular, there's not a lot of written sources prior to that time period. So we're not going to focus as much as I would like to on early human history in North America, but we are going to focus on it more than I think most people do. A lot of people just briefly discuss pre-1492 history, or they maybe even just fast forward past it entirely, go straight to Jamestown. Maybe they talk about Columbus a little bit, but everything before that is sort of brushed over. I don't want to do that. I want to basically spend next hour, 2 hours talking about pre-1492 history because I think it's important. And one of the reasons I think it's important is because there's a lot of misconceptions about American Indians in the United States. If you were to ask the average American what they think about Indians, American Indians, what visions would come to their head? I imagine that some 80, 90% of people in the United States would think of somebody like this. People riding around on horseback, moving from one place to another, hunter-gatherers, primarily nomadic, Stone Age, maybe visions of a teepee. People, there's if you went back to the 50s, it would be sort of barbarians, savages. In the 70s, are sort of replaced by these environmentalists. But it's all the same, whether you look at people in the 50s, 70s. One's sort of a negative depiction, one's less negative, but both are off, okay? So as we're going to talk about, you are going to have some American Indians that are hunter-gatherers that move from one place to another. You're going to have some people that live in teepees, like this vision that most people have in the United States. But if you're talking about pre-1492, this is a minority of the people that live in North America. Most people in North America would be closer to this. You're going to have some cities in North America that are going to be in the tens of thousands of people. You're actually going to have one city, more than 200,000 people. You're going to have people that don't wear, leather, don't move after the buffalo. Instead, they wear cotton clothing. They have jewelry. They have trade networks that go thousands of miles. They have sewage systems. They have bronze working. You have people that, complex mathematics, complex astronomy. There are a lot more American Indians that fit into this category, at least the sedentary agriculturalist category, than you're going to have the nomadic hunter-gatherer type that most Americans think of, okay? So we're going to talk about American Indians a lot because I want to sort of push past this view of American Indians and sort of bring this view a little closer to home, all right? Another reason to talk about American Indians is because they have a huge cultural influence on us today. Probably not as much as the English or the Spanish, maybe not even not as much as the French, but you are going to have a lot of our way of life that are going to be impacted by North American Indians. We have certain sports like lacrosse that are somewhat come from American Indians. We have, as we're going to talk about, geographical population factors that owing to American Indians. Food. A lot of our food today was originally cultivated from wild plants by American Indians. We'll discuss this at length. Corn, tomatoes, potatoes, these staples of our diet were originally cultivated by American Indian agriculturalists. So part of what we are, literally the calories that we consume, originally came from sedentary agriculturalist American Indians. A lot of our words in the United States today are American Indian. Okay, if you think of words like hickory, mesquite, buffalo, iguana, these are all originally American Indian terms. Okay, so primarily English and Spanish spoken in the United States. A lot of that came from Europe. But when they come over here to the New World, a lot of things they don't understand, they don't have words for because they didn't exist in Europe. Well, these new words are going to come from American Indians. We'll talk about a lot of those later. Another sort of cultural influence is the fact that a good chunk of the places in the United States are named by American Indians, or named after American Indians, or named after things that Europeans observed about American Indians. If you look at a map of the United States today, about half of the place names are going to have American Indian origins. Okay, so some of them, Florida is Spanish. A lot of these ones on the East Coast, they're of English origin. But you go to places like Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, kind of Indiana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, Texas. Texas, where I live, is comes from an American Indian term. There was a Caddo Indian sedentary agriculturalist here in East Texas. When the Spanish came up and first met these people, they started asking them a number of questions. A group of these Caddos said either they were called the Tejas or that that was their word for friend. The Spanish didn't necessarily understand what they're saying, but they wrote the word Tejas on a map. This is where the Tejas people live. And then, this map was passed to the next person, passed to the next person. Pretty soon the location came to be known as Texas. Mississippi, Alabama, same type of thing. Europeans come through, they write down the name of these Indian places, these creeks, or names of rivers, something like that, for the Indians, and then it goes on a map, and then it becomes part of our cultural lexicon. So our places are named after American Indians, and again, roughly half the states in the United States have American Indian names. All right. Indians are going to influence where people live as well. If you're looking at a map of the United States today, some places, not really much connection with American Indians. Maybe they passed through, maybe there's a village there a long time ago, maybe it was a hunting ground, something like that. But a significant portion of the cities in the United States are related to American Indians in one way or another. Okay. We're going to talk about a couple different reasons for that, but me being from Texas, I'm just going to go ahead and point out a couple examples here in Texas. So you've got Texas has a lot of major cities. Biggest cities in Texas: Austin, Dallas, Houston, El Paso, Fort Worth, San Antonio. Dallas, Houston, Austin, they have their own origins. Let's set those ones to the side. But let's look at El Paso and San Antonio. Why are they where they are? Well, they actually owe to American Indians, because we're going to see the Spanish are going to come in. This is something we'll talk about later. They have this idea of spreading Catholicism to Indians, and they're going to go to certain locations, El Paso, San Antonio being one. American Indian group there that they think is going to be receptive to conversion. They settle down there. So this is a European group settling in a location because American Indians are there. So that's two of Texas's big cities. Another Texas big city, Fort Worth. This is going to be when American settlers start settling in this area. Around this region is where we see those hunter-gatherers we traditionally think of as Indians, or most Americans do. These settlers needed protection. So what the federal government does is they build a fort, Fort Worth, and this fort becomes a place where people live. You don't want to get attacked by this particular nomadic hunter-gatherer group, these Comanches and Apaches. So you settle around the fort. Pretty soon the population grows, and you have a city. Other times, this is going to be the case with a lot of these eastern areas, particularly this area around here. When Americans, English, they come in, French, they start moving to areas where there's going to be no trees, and it's going to look like the ground's already tilled. You know, we as humans want to go to do the least amount of work as possible. So if you're moving to an area and you see one's densely wooded, you're trying to grow food, cotton, something like that, you're not going to go to a place where there's tons of trees because you got to chop the trees down, you got to clear out the stumps. That's a lot of work. But if you go to an area and everything's clear and it looks like the soil's been tilled, you don't have to break through those tough roots, that's where you're going to settle. Well, a lot of Europeans and Americans, they're going to settle in areas where the woods have already been cleared because there'd previously been Indian villages there. As a matter of fact, Texas, East Texas, a number of cities, particularly Nacogdoches is one of the bigger cities in Texas. It used to be the site of a Caddo village. Basically, Americans come through, they see this area that's been cleared. They're like, well, why is there no trees here? Why is the soil so loose? Well, it's because the Caddos used to live there. They died, moved west for a lot of reasons we'll talk about later. But these first Americans, they don't know that. They just know this land's been cleared. We see a lot of areas up in the Northeast, and we'll talk about this when we get to the Pilgrims, things like that. Same thing. There used to be an Indian village here. There's not any longer. Everything looks cleared out. Let's go ahead and live here. So American Indians affect where people live. A lot of our major cities used to be former Indian places. A lot of our roads today are built on former American Indian roads and trails, right? So you're going to have these American Indian villages, cities, and you need to go from one place to another. You have a trading network. Well, you got a road between one place and another. The trees are cleared. Europeans come in. Hey, why are the trees cleared between here? Let's go ahead and build a road. Or, you'll talk about Indians hunting. We need to get chase after the deer or whatever. This is a traditional hunting trail. Oh, well, let's stake I-95 here or something. So you're going to have American Indians affect where our roads are. There are some people that talk about American Indians affecting our environment. As we'll talk about later, American Indians, in order to properly or efficiently hunt or grow crops, they would burn large swaths of the environment. Same thing out here on the plains. In order to better hunt buffalo, you'd see American Indians burn these large fields. This is going to affect the environment significantly. Some people argue that the reason we have less trees out here, particularly this area out here, less to do with rainfall, and it's just more the fact that American Indians have been burning this for such a long time. It destroyed a lot of the native plant species. So that sort of environmental manipulation, that's not something people think about when they think about American Indians, because you have, again, this vision that's popular that of people one with the environment. That's absolutely not true, as we're going to be talking about. American Indians, just like everybody else, do what's best for their survival. So enormous impacts to us today, cultural, where we live, things like that. All right, so we're going to be talking about American Indians a lot, but we're probably not going to be talking about them as much as we should. Why not? Why don't we spend 95% of the time pre-1492, just get that last 500 years in the last 2 lectures or so? Well, this is because we simply don't know as much about American Indians. We're relying on fewer sources. As we're going to talk about later, American Indians in one area of the Americas had writing, but for the most part, they didn't develop writing. And this is a huge problem because telling history is really hard without writing, okay? This is a Mayan writing system. Most didn't have writing. The only thing you've got as far as written records is, these petroglyphs. You go to a rock face in, say, New Mexico, you look at it, you can kind of get a guess of what's going on. You can maybe look at this and you're going to say, okay, this appears to be maybe shamans or something dancing around a snake. But then somebody else could look at this and say, nope, these are hunters. This is a river. They're attacking this enemy tribe over there. You can maybe look at this and say, all right, this is clouds. Another person might look and say it's a mountain. The thing with non-written sources is they can be interpreted in a lot of ways. So we can't exactly get the correct story from petroglyphs. We got to have a written system, and not very many American Indians had a written system, just these Mayans. So for that reason, we just simply don't know as much about them. Now we can use archaeology, we can use early European sources, sort of piece things together. We could get modern oral histories of Indians to sort of get back into the past. But all of these have problems as well. So if you went and you asked, say, somebody living in Navajo territory today, tell me about your people's past. Well, some of the stuff they say might be accurate, but as we all know, it's like a game of telephone. You start out somebody saying Super Bowl, the next person says Supper Bowl, the next person says uh, Supper, the next person says Superman, and eventually by the time you get to the end, you have something completely different than it was at the beginning. So oral histories can tell you something, but if you're talking pre-1492, a lot's been so distorted it's impossible to talk about. You could also maybe look at early European sources. I met these people in, say, 1562. This is what they were like. All right, so we know what they're like in 1562. Does that necessarily mean we know what they were like in 1362? That's 300 years. And then also you're getting these European accounts that are biased. And a lot of people take the term bias and they mean it to mean something, negative. Not necessarily. We all contain our biases. So if you're European coming over, you're writing about this American Indian group, 1562. You start describing them, but you're not going to describe the things that make you similar. So if you're a European walking into this group of Indians, this is actually a Englishman that drew this Indian settlement in the 1580s. Maybe he's going to describe, hey, they live in houses just like we live in. They grow crops like we grow crops. They breastfeed their children like we breastfeed our children. Maybe they'll describe things that are similar, but more often than not, they're going to do what we're going to do. If you go to France, you go into a McDonald's, you see the menu at the French McDonald's, 98% is exactly like the menu in the United States. You're not going to put on your Instagram, went into McDonald's and they had fries just like us, dipped them in ketchup like us. Nobody's going to describe that because that's what we're used to. You're going to describe the fact they have a snail burger or something like that. I don't know if they really have that, but you're going to point to things that are out that are different. So we can't learn that much about pre-1492 from the first people that meet American Indians because they're not exactly getting to the heart of their culture. They're pointing out the stuff that's different. So like when we talk about the Spanish arriving, they're going to be describing things that they don't have in Europe, like human sacrifice. The way they describe it is like it's happening every day. Like there's chopping heads off left and right. But in reality, it's something that happened, on occasion. But the Europeans see it, and that's all they can focus on because, like the snail burger at the French McDonald's, it's so different than what they're used to. So part of the reason we don't focus on it is just because we don't know as much about it. Again, we can get archaeologists, can dig up certain things. Maybe we can learn what they eat from waste dumps. Maybe we can, dig up houses, the remains of houses and determine that. But even then, you can't get the full story of a civilization. So we're going to talk about American Indians not as much as I would like, simply because we just don't have as much, all right? So in order to talk about the first people that arrived in North America, we need to talk about the first people. Okay, so a couple million years ago, you started getting these mammals, these primates, starting to walk on two legs, starting to have opposable thumbs, these humanoid creatures. We had these humanoid creatures in Africa. We actually had a number of different humanoids. I'm not going to go into this a lot, in part because anthropologists don't know as much as we want them to know about this stuff. As a matter of fact, we're going to be using a lot of dates in this talk that the people are still debating. Okay, anthropologists continue to come up with evidence that disagrees with one another. And some people say this date this happened, and other people said this date this happened. So the dates I'm going to use for the next half hour or so, a lot of these are highly contentious. They're based on estimates. So till anthropologists get their act together, just know that what we're saying is some guesswork, okay? And it's a lot of estimates, and they may come along and say, nope, things happen completely different. But until that happens, we sort of got to rely on the general consensus among anthropologists. So if there's new evidence that I'm not getting out there, I apologize, but it's blame the anthropologists because they can't make up their mind. All right, so a couple million years ago, we start getting these humanoids here in Africa. This is going to be where we start seeing these bipedal creatures with these opposable thumbs. We start moving around here in Africa, as we'll talk about some of these humanoid species, these Neanderthals. I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Denisovans out here, these hobbit creatures in Indonesia. Some are going to expand out of Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago. But there's one particular group that's going to be here in Central Africa. These humanoids are going to be about 100,000 years ago, a group that you would recognize as humans. They start to appear as modern humans. And these humans are going to differentiate themselves not just from other animals, but from other humanoids. They're going to start doing things that other animals simply don't do. They're going to start creating tools. All right, so you'll see a sea otter smash a clam with a rock. You'll see, maybe a chimpanzee pick up a stick to clean their nails or something. But you don't see animals create tools and use them on a regular basis like you're going to see these humanoids start to do. You'll start seeing these humans create art. They'll start painting hands on walls. They'll start making music. Other animals don't create music. They'll start playing drums. They'll start using sticks to hit logs. They'll start the basics of what we would call civilization, burying their dead. Start creating fish hooks to better fish. Why does this start happening to these humans? Again, it starts a couple million years ago, but we're really going to start seeing this differentiation between humans and other animals about 100,000 years ago or so. I'm not going to worry too much about this again because there's a ton of disagreement about it, but we see these humans start emerging, and some people call it a great leap forward. I don't know if I agree with that term, but what you're going to see is people start to be different. Why is this the case? Well, some people think it's because humans start getting protein, more protein than other animals. Their technological advances allow them to hunt more efficiently. The extra protein starts allowing them to think better. Some people think it's the development of a vocal cord. So whereas dogs, they can bark danger, they can bark food, they can't bark. You go 2 miles down the road, you take a right at Luby's and you go a block and you're going to find the In-N-Out. They can't do that. Humans can do that. Some people think the advent of the vocal cord prioritized, intelligence, and so humans start evolving with bigger brains. Those with bigger brains start to survive. Some people think, fire promoted sociality between humans. Humans started sharing a fire, developed altruism, being nice to one another. A ton of different things. If you're religious, you could say maybe it's a divine intervention. If you like Ancient Aliens, you could say the aliens stepped in. I don't have any idea. It's just humans started doing things about starting a couple million years ago, but by 100,000 years ago, they've set themselves apart from other creatures on the planet, and they're doing these things that other animals don't do. They start wearing clothing. Shortly thereafter, this are going to start domesticating animals. They'll start taking dogs, selectively breeding them, or wolves, and they'll take the wolves that are more cuddly towards humans, nicer, and more efficient in helping them hunt, and they'll start using them as companions. So humans start doing this stuff 100,000 years ago or so, setting themselves apart. Well, about 75,000 years ago, we're going to see these humans here in Central Africa. Some of them are going to start expanding out of Africa. Now, again, there's a lot of debate about when this happened, how exactly it happened. Anthropologists, make up your damn mind. Don't blame me if I'm getting my dates wrong. But, 75,000 years ago or so, we see some of these humans expand out of Africa into these other areas. Some are going to proceed down here to Australia at the time. Actually, the sea levels are a little bit lower, so they just cross along this land to Australia. We're going to have some go to Europe. And as these humans go along, they're actually going to eliminate these other humanoids as they go. So we have, they go around here, they kill these hobbit creatures in Indonesia, Neanderthals, they kill them as they go along. There's actually some mating with these animals, so we have traces of the DNA of some of these other humanoids as we go along. But basically, they eliminate them as they start expanding out of Africa. Well, over the thousands of years of this expansion, so this isn't just 75,000 years you spread out. It's, one generation, we'll have some extra kids, will go here, another generation, this will go here. But you start seeing this genetic differentiation between humans, this sort of genetic adaptation. And some of this sort of minor, tiny genetic adaptation will be in response to environment. Like what you're going to have is some people at elevation here in areas like Nepal, because they're so high, oxygen so low, they'll develop greater lung capacity than people in other areas. Other people living near the coast, having to dive for clams, same thing, bigger lung capacity. People in more northern areas where there's a lot of overcast, not nearly as much sun, you're not getting enough vitamin D absorption, you'll see lighter skin. People in darker areas, especially those at elevation, are people in more equatorial regions at elevation will start developing darker skin, and this is in part because avoiding radiation, the stuff that causes skin cancer. So you start seeing darker skinned people towards the equator, lighter skinned people up here. Most of these genetic factors, just sort of the minor genetic ticks, not really going to be a factor in human history, although the perception of the difference will be a big factor in human history. We will see some sort of genetic adaptations that will play a part in U.S. history. For example, some people in certain areas will develop tolerance towards tropical diseases, like people in Central Africa and India will develop greater resistance to malaria. It becomes such a big issue, passes from one person to another, that certain people developed resistance in other areas more so than in other areas, simply because malaria is a bigger factor in these areas. So there is going to be minor genetic ticks. Some of these ticks, by the way, we can't really explain. As people expand out, some people start getting blue eyes, green eyes. We don't know why that's the case. But we start seeing these genetic adaptations. People with different types of hair, people less facial hair, straight hair. We start seeing versus curly hair. We start seeing these variations as humans start expanding. Well, happens from about 75,000 BC to about 32,000 BC or so. We have humans almost all throughout this eastern hemisphere. Well, what's going to happen is about 32,000 years ago, and again, there's a lot of debate among anthropologists about this, but about 32,000 years ago, we're going to have a group of humans start expanding into this eastern Siberia area. And in particular, they're going to expand into this area that's right in between what's today Russia and Alaska. So they expand in this region. And this particular group of humans, if you were to look at them, they're going to be genetically somewhat different than humans in other areas, but technology-wise, they're going to be about the same. By 32,000 years ago or so, humans throughout the Eastern Hemisphere had started developing these somewhat complex tools. You had stone tips on your spears. Humans had gotten to that point. They're starting to wear leather clothing, to keep themselves warm. They domesticated dogs. So no matter where you go, you've got this sort of technological level in the Eastern Hemisphere. So technology-wise, these people are the same as people in Africa, Australia, Europe. Again, genetically, there's going to be some variations. These people, and these are going to be the ancestors of modern American Indians. generally straight or black hair, very little to no facial hair. But yes, but as far as technology, very similar. So this group starts expanding out here over courses of generations. They're chasing the game herd. Again, at this point, humans are all hunter gatherers. Nobody's planning food. They're just going from one place to another chasing food. And this particular group goes into this area that today doesn't exist. So about 32,000 years ago, it was a lot colder than it is today because of science stuff. Basically, the Earth was colder, and what this meant is that more water was trapped in the ice caps in the north, more water down trapped in the ice caps here. So if you have a lot more ice, that means less water in the oceans. So areas that today are covered in water were not covered in water 32,000 years ago. So more water in the ice caps. This area in between Alaska and Russia, again, it's covered in water today, was not 32,000 years ago, is going to be this region where these humans expand into about 32,000 years ago. We call this area Beringia. You'll sometimes hear Bering Land Bridge. That's not accurate because it's not going to be something that people just cross. As a matter of fact, humans are going to inhabit this region for 10,000 years or so, from 32,000 years ago or so to about 20,000 years ago or so. We have people living in this region, couple hundred, couple thousand people at certain points, hunting animals, moving from one place to another in this Beringia. Well, they're not going to expand beyond Beringia into North America. No humanoid creatures have been in North America up to this point. Again, there's some anthropologists debate, but 32,000 years ago, humans hadn't been in there, and they're not going to be in there for another 10,000 years because when humans first expanded in North America, Canada is covered with this huge ice sheet. Okay, there's this huge ice sheet that humans can't cross because if you have ice covering everything, which the Earth being much colder, you're not going to have vegetation. You can't get sunlight to the plants because it's covered in ice, and because plants can't grow, you're not going to have animals. Humans get to this region, well, there's no plants we can eat, there's no animals, so we're not going to pass into this area. So I want you to kind of think about 32,000 years ago, humans stopping right here. Think about it maybe like the ice wall in Game of Thrones. For those who've seen Game of Thrones, it's like the ice wall keeping the wildlings out. Basically, humans aren't going to move past this area, not because of a huge ice wall, but just because there's nothing beyond it that's going to be suitable for for humans to eat. So 32,000 years ago they arrive, and they're going to sort of mess around in here until about 20,000 years ago. So what starts happening right around 20,000 years ago or so is that there's going to be the end of this ice age. So again, science stuff, I'll let your environmental science professor explain this, but about 20,000 years ago, and there are actually a lot of interesting theories about why this comes to an end, but about 20,000 years ago or so, the Earth starts to get warmer. Now, it's not going to be something like immediately the temperature's going up, but gradually you're going to see a temperature rise. And when this happens, what will happen is you're going to start to see this ice sheet recede, not just in this area, but also along the coast. So that's one thing. But you're also going to see all this ice trapped in the ice caps. And when this starts getting hotter, melting, water is going to start covering this region right here that is today covered with water. So you have these people here. Well, as water starts going down, again, this isn't going to happen immediately. Maybe what you'll start to see happen is a creek start forming. Then 50 years later, there's a river. Then maybe 200 or 2,000 years later, now you have this area that's going to separate humans over here from humans over there. And for a while, there'll continue to be contact between these groups, but eventually it's going to get to the point where you can't have contact between people in the eastern part of Beringia and the western part because now you're covered by an ocean. So this is going to leave about 600 or so people, and I've heard a bunch of different estimates about this, who are going to essentially be trapped over here on this eastern part now that there's this water separating. So again, 20,000 years ago or so, this says 18,000 years, but whatever, 20,000 years ago or so, you start to see this group now isolated from this other side. Well, again, the other factor with the Earth getting warmer is this ice starts to recede from Candace. So Candace covered it in an ice sheet. That starts to melt. So now you're going to start seeing vegetation return. And you're also going to see these coastal areas, some of the ice covering the coastal areas will start to recede. So we're going to see these migrations. And again, anthropologists are disagreeing about this. But what we think happened is some humans start to travel along the coast now that there's places to actually stop as you're going down the coast. So humans will start proceeding down here in probably these very rudimentary canoes. And another group is going to start pushing into this area as these glaciers start receding. And again, 20,000 years ago or so, you start seeing humans move into the interior of North America. Now, when they get into this area of North America, this past this ice sheet into areas that had never been covered in the ice sheet, they're going to be entering a region that had never seen humans before. So this eastern hemisphere, by this point, humans have been just about everywhere for thousands of years. Okay, again, tens of thousands of years in Africa, and then thousands and thousands of years in these other areas. Now you're going into this area of North America where humans had never been before. And this is going to be a problem because a lot of the animals of this region had never seen humans. So humans are coming in, and at this point, they've been doing human stuff for a while. They've been perfecting their stone tools. They've been creating spears. They've been using language to develop complex hunting patterns. And the animals of North America, once humans push past this ice sheet, they're going to be greeted by these creatures that they don't know to be scared of, okay? So when humans are first developing these tools, learning how to hunt, learning how to create stone tools, spears, things like that, here in Africa, the animals are going to be able to evolve alongside them. So you're going to have elephants, you're going to have giraffes, all these huge megafauna, these large creatures, rhinos. They're going to start seeing, hey, this small creature looks like he's creating this wood stick killing Bill. This more skittish animals are going to survive and learn to sort of be scared of human evolution wise. And actually, depending on the intelligence level you attribute to elephants and some of these other animals, maybe they actually have some cognitive learning for them to be afraid of humans. But they're going to start learning to be scared of these small creatures. Early humans, not very tall, 4 foot tall, but they learn they can do crazy stuff. And you're going to see that somewhat happen out over here when humans start expanding to these regions. A lot of these larger animals are going to be at early human technology, so they're going to have time to adapt to humans, run away from humans, and they're going to have time to evolve these techniques to run away from humans. These first animals in North America, they aren't going to have this time to be evolved. Humans show up and they're at a technological level that these animals hadn't seen. And so when they see humans, they just see, wow, that's a weird guy walking on 2 feet, but I don't have to be scared of him because I weigh 2 tons. I'm a huge, having more than that, 6 tons. I'm a huge woolly mammoth. I can just stomp this guy if I'm scared. But when humans start throwing these spears into these guys, surrounding them, using these complex techniques, these guys are going to start dying. These large megafauna are going to start getting killed off. This is a screenshot from Far Cry Primal. I think it's kind of interesting depiction of this. But basically, these animals aren't going to have a chance to evolve because humans are going to be at a technological level that's going to start driving these guys to extinction. So you go in, start chunking spears into woolly mammoth. This guy's going to die. And yeah, Bill over here, he dies. Steve over there is going to die as well because humans are going to be, before he can go on and pass his sort of skittish traits to his children, humans will hunt him down and kill him. This is not just going to happen with woolly mammoths. This is going to happen with these large elk that used to live in the area that's North America, these oxen. It happens to the descendants of, so Western Hemisphere has similar animals to the Eastern Hemisphere a long time past. Horses, similar to modern horses, had passed in North America. Those are going to be driven to extinction by these early humans. Ox, the North American version of a ox, the sort of North American version of a cow. These are all going to be driven to extinction by humans. By the way, this happens in other areas as well. Australia. Some people debate whether humans are the main factor about this death of these large animals. I think most anthropologists and most natural scientists now agree that that's ridiculous. It's because where humans go, animals go extinct. But humans start driving these animals to extinction. It's not just the prey animals. A lot of animals like saber-toothed tiger and a lot of these animals that are used to these slow but large animals that they feast off, these large wolves. North America used to have large wolves, dire wolves. If you ever seen Game of Thrones, those used to be real animals. They die off because the larger, easy to catch animals die off. So when humans come in, they start driving these megafauna to extinction, okay? And again, I think the reason, I think most anthropologists, most people think it's the reason, is because humans come in at a technological level these things had never seen before. They don't have a chance to evolve because humans are such efficient hunters. Now, the thing is, if you're the first humans to arrive in this area, this is awesome. This is free food. You don't have to go chasing after all these animals. You just go to the 7-Eleven down the street, these large woolly mammoths, kill one of them, you have meat for the next 6 months. You know, your group doesn't have to worry about it. Then you kill the next one, you're fine. So it's great for the first generation because it's easy meat source, all right? Now the problem is, again, that this meat isn't going to last forever. So the first humans come in, they find these woolly mammoths. You know, all right, great, we got these woolly mammoths here. We're fine for my generation, maybe my kids' generation. Again, this is going to be a migration that happens not over the course of dozens of years, but hundreds and thousands of years. Maybe you're fine for a couple hundred years with the woolly mammoth, but they go extinct. So now we're going to have to start moving. So you start seeing this massive migration of humans into the interior of North America. By about 15,000 years ago or so, you already have humans here in Texas. As a matter of fact, right outside of Austin, I believe, there was recently a dig that found woolly mammoths probably killed by humans about 15,000 years ago or so. So humans are expanding quickly. Some are going along the coast, similar megafauna extinction. As a matter of fact, Mexico, these large ground sloths that used to exist, we think humans drive those to extinction. There's these large armadillos that are about the size of a Volkswagen Bug. Humans kill those off. Again, because they're easy prey, because they don't see the humans as a threat. So humans are starting to expand. Great. Again, once you reach an area, you're fine. Maybe your kids are going to be fine. But subsequent generations, these guys go extinct so quickly, you got to move on. So the extinction of this megafauna is going to force humans to move quickly. By 10,000 years ago or so, we have humans all the way here in South America. They expand that quickly, following these game herds, or following these megafauna. But by about 10,000 years ago or so, most of the megafauna have gone extinct. There were some pockets, you know, some people even say today giant ground sloths exist in the Amazon. That's probably not true. There are a couple pockets of this large megafauna that will exist until, maybe 8,000 years ago in certain areas. But for the most part, the megafauna are gone by 10,000 years ago or so. So now we're going to have humans throughout these North and South America that don't have this easy source of food. You can't just run up and chunk it into a woolly mammoth to get a food because now they're gone. Well, that's going to be a problem. All right. Another problem is going to be not for the generations now, but some of the animals these guys are going to drive to extinction might have been useful when you later get into domestication and agriculture. So people in Europe, what they'd done is they had Europe and Africa and Asia, we're going to see them later take some of these animals and do what had been done with dogs before, start breeding them for certain qualities. Take horses, breed the most kindest, gentlest ones, the ones with the strongest backs, and they're going to start riding them. People in Africa will take these cows, the ones that are the most docile, the ones that you can breed uh, in a close setting with humans, and they're going to start using them, breeding them for meat. You know, certain areas going to start breeding cows so you can drink their milk. American Indians aren't going to have the opportunity because this first generation is going to kill, or first couple generations are going to kill off a lot of these animals that you could later domesticate. So they're not going to have access to horses, cows, things like that, because they're going to have gone extinct because these first generations. So again, while it's great for the first couple generations, easy meat, subsequent generations aren't going to have domesticatable animals, animals you can ride, animals you can use later on when you get agriculture to plow or things like that. So that's going to be a problem. And as we're going to talk about later, less animals, less domestic animals, is going to mean less sharing of diseases between humans and animals. So we always have these fear of bird flu, SARS, COVID-19 passed from bats to humans. A lot of diseases pass between animals and humans. Well, people in the old world, because their animals evolved alongside them and they're able to domesticate them and they're going to live beside their animals, they're going to be domesticating these animals, living by them, and they're going to be passing diseases. This is going to be a negative for them for a couple generations, but eventually the people that develop immunities to those diseases, sort of genetic immunities, they're going to survive, pass those immunities down to the children. We're not going to see that happen as much here in the Americas because again, with this megafauna extinction, less domesticated animals, less disease passing from one people to another. Now, as we'll talk about later, they're not going to kill off every domesticatable animal. We'll talk about llamas, turkeys, stuff like that, and they brought in hunting dogs, but the big ones are going to be gone. So bad for later generations because you don't have these work animals and you don't have this disease exchange. So you're stuck without these big animals. What now? How else are we going to get food? Well, people up here have been figuring this out since their megafauna have gone extinct first. And then people are going to figure out down here as they're expanding out as their megafauna go extinct. But now you got to hunt the smaller stuff, the stuff that's actually afraid of humans and have been afraid of humans. Deer are incredibly skittish. They're going to run from humans when they first come in. They're going to run away. We have these buffalo. Buffalo are incredibly skittish animals. They're large, and as a matter of fact, after humans kill everything off, buffalo are going to be the largest land mammal in North America. Part of the reason they're going to survive humans is because they get scared. They're sort of these herd animals. When humans come around, they run away. So the smaller animals, things like rabbits, deers, biggest one again being buffalo, they're going to survive. Now you have these animals, they're not easy to kill like the mammoths. They don't just sit there because they're not scared of the humans. Can't just walk up to them and throw a spear in their side. How do we get them? You know, they run away. Well, this is going to force humans to develop methods to hunt smaller game. We'll see humans come up with things like the atlatl. Eventually, you know, a couple thousand years ago in the Americas, hey, buffalo run away if we get close to them. What if we take a stick, put another stick on it? It sort of creates this extra joint. We can chunk a spear 3 times as far as we can chunk it if we're just throwing with our hands. This will allow us to kill much more efficiently. Let's develop bows and arrows. Eventually, we're going to have the bow and arrow developed here in the Americas, and that's going to allow you to kill animals at much greater distance. We'll see humans come up with things like traps. You know, you'll start driving buffalo off a cliff. We know they run away from us, so why don't we go ahead and scare them so they fall off a cliff, and then we'll kill them. I like this picture. This is it's supposed to be 2 American Indians. You can see they got the bows and arrows. They're trying to get close to the buffalo. Again, buffalo are skittish. How do we get by them? Well, these guys are dumbasses because they're wearing wolves. Buffalo are also scared of wolves. Why would you pick that as a costume? This guy knows exactly what these two dudes are up to. Why not dress as a deer or another buffalo? Anyway, I don't think whatever these guys are doing is very smart. But other sort of techniques that are going to come up with are going to be very smart. So we have humans all throughout the Americas at this point. They're starting to develop this technology. They're still hunter-gatherers, though, gatherers about 10,000 years ago. But now they're having to work for these smaller animals because the big, easy stuff is gone. Well, we're going to see one more reaction to this megafauna, and this is going to occur in two areas of the Americas. One is going to be here in Mesoamerica, one is going to be in the Andes. And what's going to happen is two groups are going to figure out, hey, there might be an easier way to acquire calories. What's this little thing that appears in all this fruit and stuff like that? Why don't we plant this in the ground and see what happens with it?